Very much indeed. That's Harry Fawcett live for us from Jerusalem. Nader Hashemi is the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver. He's joining us now from Denver on Skype. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. Given the fact that, as Harry was talking about, this is coming on the back of the rhetoric that's been going backwards and forwards about the Iran nuclear deal, do you think that it is likely that Iran would take such action given the level of tension that currently exists about the nuclear deal?
Well, I think what Iran is responding to is less what Donald Trump said yesterday and more what Harry, your correspondent in the region, just reported. There has been a series of increasing clashes between Israel and Iranian assets and Iranian military troops in Syria over the last several weeks. There was the report that your correspondent just mentioned of the downing of the Israeli jet and the shooting down of an Iranian drone. But on April the 9th, there was a major Israeli airstrike on a military base in Syria where Iranian troops were located, killing, according to some reports, between 8 and 12 Iranian Revolutionary Guard troops. On April the 16th, there was another Israeli attack on military bases where Iranian troops were located. Just yesterday, after Donald Trump spoke, there was a report of an Israeli attack against Iranian assets in Syria. And then we have this, I think, Iranian rocket fire, 20 rockets heading toward Israel. So I think that's really what's happening here. I think there is an attempt by Iranian forces in Syria to respond to increasing Israeli attacks on Iranian forces. We don't know if this means a larger war, or if this is simply both sides trying to test each other to establish new rules for engagement. That remains to be seen.
I want to ask you specifically about the fact that we're only at the moment hearing from the Israelis and from the Syrian news agencies. We've yet to hear anything from Iran, and it is proving, of course, difficult to try to establish exactly what's going on because this is breaking news. In the event that what we're hearing is true and Iran has been involved in this, how likely is it, do you think, that this could escalate, and to what scale?
Well, I think the chance of escalation is huge because I think yesterday's announcement by Donald Trump is the key transformative event. If you listen to what is being said within the inner foreign policy circles of Donald Trump, if you listen to what's being said by Benjamin Netanyahu and what's being said in Riyadh, among the leaders of the House of Saud, there's an attempt to really play hardball against Iran's role in the region, to use the tearing up of the nuclear deal as sort of really the first step to go after Iran and to try and press it militarily, either to provoke it, to respond to Israel or to the West, which would then, allow for a much more formidable American and or Israeli attack on Iranian assets throughout the region. So I think this is the real danger of escalation. What I hear from, Trump's close foreign policy advisors, in fact, they're sort of explicit about this. Their policy is regime change in Iran. And I think this is the first step in trying to go after Iran, both militarily in terms of where it's quite vulnerable. I think in Syria, where Iran is actually quite embarrassed. It doesn't want to sort of talk about the details of what it's doing in Syria because those are ugly details that involve war crimes. So I think this is really the evidence of something much more ominous taking place. I don't think this is simply a one-off, and the great fear of a larger Middle Eastern war that many people have predicted could ensue as a result of the ending of the nuclear agreement seems to be upon us.
I want to ask you about what it would take to tamp down the tensions that are going on in the region at the moment. We've got President Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel, who is currently in Moscow. He's been talking to Vladimir Putin. Is there a role for Russia in this to step in, given its positioning in the Middle East at the moment and its influence there, to try to find some way of balancing this out?
That's an excellent question. There seems to be no international player that can step in and that has credibility among all of the countries in the region that are now preparing for war with each other. The one country that you just alluded to is the only country that has direct diplomatic relations with every single player, and that's Vladimir Putin's Russia. They have relations with Israel, the United States, with Iran, and with all the other countries in the region. So this, in many ways, actually increases, I think, Vladimir Putin's clout and influence in the Middle East, because it's the only country that has diplomatic relations with all of the key players. So in that sense, Putin does have a role to play. But of course, given what Putin has been doing in Syria and the rest of the world, that's not a trusted, impartial party that I think anyone should bet on to try and stabilize the Middle East. So that actually, I think, heightens the concern that many of us have that we're headed toward a much larger and more devastating war in the Middle East.
If that's the case and this does start to expand, is this going to put the U.S. in a position where it may be forced to take some sort of military action itself to try to offset, if you like, the influence of Russia?
Well, I don't think the United States is going to go after Russia, at least under President Obama and now under Donald Trump. There seems to be a very consistent, at least U.S. policy towards Syria, that Russia can do what it wants in Syria. The other player in Syria, of course, is Iran, and that's the obsession of Donald Trump and his foreign policy advisors, particularly John Bolton, Pompeo, and Rudolph Giuliani. So I think the plan here is to try and go after Iran while not touching Russia, to try and reduce Iran's influence throughout the region, perhaps goad Iran into overreacting, which then will allow for a much more robust American military response against the Islamic Republic of Iran. I think this is very much in the cards. It's not a coincidence that Benjamin Netanyahu is actually, was in Moscow today, where I think he got approval from Vladimir Putin that Russia would not get itself involved in any sort of shooting war between the Revolutionary Guard Corps in Syria and Israel. I think that's very much why this trip took place at this particular time. So these are, I think, very ominous and very dangerous developments that do not give one confidence about the prospects for peace and stability in the Middle East in the short term or even in the long term.
Good to get your views on this. Nader Hashemi is Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Denver. Thanks very much indeed. Let me just tell you that the news